Interesting. Okay. We'll start the lesson then, continue the lesson on Rule 3 of White Magic. Where we left off, he was talking about the main ingredients that in soul contact that would allow us to be able to capture a portion of the plan and execute it in our daily life. And we left off where he was talking about a main ingredient to this is to develop harmlessness. He says this: magnetic conditions as a result of man's wrong handling of force are causes of evil in the world around us, including the subhuman kingdoms. And this wrong use of force, as we explained last week, can be seen in in different genocides we've had in our history, man destroying the environment, man killing off all the buffalo, slavery, war, mob action. These are all wrong uses of force. And they filter down into just problems with family life, selfishness, hurting each other's feelings, all kinds of things. He says this is all attributed to wrong use of force, and it can be cured by harmlessness. But this wrong use of force, he points out, happens largely just because of the wrong type of vibes, so to speak, that's released into the human aura, speaking of humanity as a whole. We each release different types of vibrations into the human kingdom. The human kingdom as a whole, you got to look at as one great life. And we as individuals all contribute to that one great life. And whether our thoughts are positive or negative, whether our life is harmful or harmless, causes a certain vibration to be emanated. And he says these emanations from humanity cause almost all the negative aspects that humanity is experiencing. And they can be cured by reversing what we're throwing out into the human kingdom. So if we can reverse these things, we can create an environment where eventually the prophecy will be fulfilled. Lion shall lay down with the lamb, and so on. But so we must develop the right handling of force. And he points out different ways to create harm. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit. He says harm manifests physically, emotionally, and even through our aspirations of virtues. Okay, now it's pretty easy to see how we can create harm physically. If you go slap somebody around, that creates some harm physically. If you steal something from your neighbor, that creates physical harm. But how about emotional harm? How is that created? Give me an example of emotional harm.
Passive aggressiveness.
Yeah, okay.
Lashing out in anger, unprovoked or even provoked anger, where it's not justified.
Yeah.
Do a lot of emotional damage.
Right.
Get yelled at a lot.
And how about harm for your kids? You know, children are very sensitive, and they're a lot easier to hurt than adults are because they're not toughened in yet like we are. Like somebody like Rick, you could tell him off about all you want, and he'd probably be okay with it. But a little kid is a lot different. And this is one thing that's overlooked by parents, I think, a lot, is how to deal with their children without wounding them emotionally. How about you guys when you were young? Did your parents ever, like, inadvertently hurt your feelings? I'm sure somebody has.
A lot of guilt and shame growing up in a Mormon household.
Yeah, that can happen.
But everything I learned as a kid and thought I wouldn't convey to my kids, I still failed. You can just look at your kid a way that instills that kind of shame, or you can show disappointment. If you're not absolutely neutral in your emotions as you deal with their growth and their outbursts or whatever, then you tend to really make those issues more than they should be. I think trying to be neutral in emotional situations is key, and I wish I'd known that 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, too, I think children misunderstand if you show any unhappiness or disapproval, they might connect it to something that it is really not connected to. I know with one of my daughters at one point, something happened in her life. It's personal, I won't go into it. And she thought I was angry at her, which I wasn't. I was actually more concerned with what the fallout of what she experienced during that event in her life. But she thought it was me expressing displeasure at the event.
Yeah, children are very fragile. One of the big mistakes parents make is they say that God's going to be angry at you for doing this, and so the poor little kid thinks of that powerful God up there being displeased with him, and this can really do damage to a kid, produce a lot of guilt in him. Guilt is one of the most important things we have to overcome, and that's what we have to be saved from more than anything else. And part of the reason we have to be saved from it is because guilt is created in us when we're very young by the authorities in our lives. The Tibetan makes this statement: if harmlessness is the keynote of your life, you will do more to produce right harmonious conditions in your personality than any amount of discipline on other lines. And he says, if harmlessness is carried out, the destroyer of all, it will be the destroyer of all limitation. Now, that's an interesting thing. Destroyer of all limitation. Okay, to destroy all limitation, we have to understand harmlessness on all levels. We talked a little bit about the emotional level. How about, and probably one more thing I might add, probably one of the most difficult things to avoid in harmfulness is divorce. I've been divorced a couple times. I know some of you have. And there's no way to get out of that without hurting some feelings or hurting your kids' feelings or whatever. So the point of harmfulness, the choosing the most harmless path, is sometimes you have a choice where you're going to hurt feelings no matter what your choice is. Say if you're in a bad marriage, that bad marriage is going to create harmful conditions no matter what. If you get out of it, it's going to create temporarily very hurtful things, but eventually things will smooth over. So you have to ask yourself, what is the least harmful choice? So this is important. And then after, say, you make a mistake like in a marriage where you wound up in a divorce, then you want to ask yourself, how can I prevent this from happening again? Well, after 3 tries, I think I've finally found my wife's partner. We've been married for about over 30 years now, so we both realize we aren't going to do any better. But that's what you have to do. You have to learn from your experience. If you're in a situation where you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, then you have to pick the least harmful path, and then learn from it so you don't repeat the circumstance again. Now, this is a problem of many abused women, for instance. They're abused, they get away from the guy, and then they're attracted to somebody just like the guy that abused them, and then they repeat it over and over. And with some people, this happens maybe 2, 3, 4 different times before they either get killed or they finally learn. And so it's a tough lesson for women that get in these situations. And there's a handful of men that are abused too, even physically. So that's a problem that we all have to learn from. So this emotional abuse is, in some ways, it's more painful than the physical. Now let's move up to the mental plane. How can you harm on the plane of the mind? How do you think? Give me an example of harm done on the plane of the mind. Where's the main problem on the plane of the mind as far as making progression into the light?
When the mind slays the real.
That's true. When the mind slays the real. And when it slays the real, what occurs?
Illusion.
Illusion. Good, Asaf. Illusion. Illusion is a big problem on the plane of the mind. And what's the difference between illusion and glamour?
Well, glamour is more on an emotional level.
Right.
And the Maya there's Maya, glamour, and illusion. And illusion is on the mind, where you're not seeing clearly. It's illusion, or to be able to perceive correctly is out of your range or out of your grasp. So,
Yeah, let's take Hitler, for example. Would everyone here admit he did quite a bit of harm? Right. So he did quite a bit of harm, but he didn't have very much glamour about him. He was, according to DK, he was actually one time a 2nd-degree initiate heading for the 3rd initiation, and he took a wrong turn. And that wrong turn was caused by what?
Illusion.
Right, illusion. He had these illusions that captured his mind. That one of them was the Jews needed to be exterminated because they were a source of evil in the world. He had an illusion about that. And he was very dedicated. He was loyal to his people that were loyal to him. He was a vegetarian. He was doing everything right on the lower levels, but on this higher level, on the plane of the mind, he was captured with an illusion. And the illusion was so powerful, he brought his Nazi followers up to it, and he says, now when you have to kill a Jew, he says, don't let it affect you. Don't let it affect your mind. Just go up to the plane of the mind, he virtually told him, and calculate that this is something that just has to be done. And so he kind of put this programming into this Nazis that go up to the plane of the mind and just realize that this has to be done. This collateral damage is nothing compared to what we're fighting. And that's how he programmed his Nazi followers, and that's why they seem so cold. was because they rose above their emotions and had this implant of illusion in their mind. Now, many of us are affected by illusions that are not nearly that harmful, but what kind of illusions can cause just normal people like us to do something harmful? Any ideas?
Climate change.
Climate change, that's a real controversial one, but yeah, if a person, let's just suppose that we're headed for an ice age instead of global warming, because according to geologists, we're headed for ice age sometime in the next couple hundred years. An ice age would be a lot worse than global warming. During the last major ice age, all of Canada was covered with glaciers. So if we had another ice age like that, Canada would be no more. And the glaciers came clear down here to Boise, where I'm at. So that would be pretty destructive. So let's suppose that adding some CO2 to the atmosphere would warm it just enough to prevent a major ice age. That'd wind up being just a really good thing. So if scientists are not looking at the whole picture, they're discarding the geological cycles of ice ages and just looking at where we are now and projecting with computer models and getting it all wrong, because of an illusion that they could actually correct, then that illusion could cause quite a bit of harm. So that's an interesting example. I wasn't going to bring that up, but interesting example.
Well, another way that illusion can mess things up is fanaticism. You take any virtue and you practice it to an extreme. Something like the virtue of precision becomes piddling fussiness, and it doesn't do anybody any good. And then it's the same way if you say, "Oh yeah, we got to save the world," and then you do all these things that make life miserable for everybody just in order to save the world. It's like, it's taking it too far. I mean, save the trees, save the whales, and all that, but don't stop living to do that kind of thing.
Right. I had a guy from the Sierra Club knock on my door some time ago, wanting me to sign some petition. And so I started to have a conversation with him. And at that time we were talking about opening up ANWR. And I said, well, what have you got against ANWR? He said, oh, we'll destroy the environment. And he seemed really, he says, I can't wait till everything falls apart. He says, everything going to fall apart, and then we can live according to nature. And I says, well, how are you going to survive then? You going to just live in the woods? And he acted like him. Well, yeah, it'd be a lot better than what we have now. I said, well, let's suppose we could get the oil out of ANWR by just digging up one shovel full of dirt. I says, would you be willing to disturb one shovel full of dirt up there? You know what his answer was? He said no. he wasn't willing to disturb one shovel full of dirt. Okay, well,
You drew a line in the sand.
There was a illusion in there somewhere, that's for sure. But another great illusion is in different churches preaching that their way is the only way and everybody else is going to hell. And because of their illusion around these different beliefs, it causes them to feel very separative from everyone else that's not in their group, as if everybody else is in a different category. But the truth is, we as human beings, we're all in this together. And there's good people everywhere that are going to be in a lot better shape than we think when everything is said and done. Okay. So he says, if we follow the principles of harmlessness, he says it will lead to a silence of the tongue, which grows out of non-reference to the separative self. Should be we instead of I. Yeah, leading to the silence of the tongue. Sometimes it's best just to be quiet and not say what you think. I have people accosting me on different things and saying some pretty outrageous stuff to me, and oftentimes I don't say anything back because I know it'll just aggravate them if I disagree with them. But then there's other times where your soul prompts you to, you can only be silent so long, and sometimes you have to speak up. So to be truly harmless, you have to know when to be quiet and when to speak. And to be truly harmless requires good judgment, which is the second key of knowledge. Because you just can't have black and white rules. You just can't say to be harmless, you'll just be quiet all the time, or to be harmless, you'll always speak up. There's no always about it. Like Solomon says, there's a time and place for everything. And when you approach a situation where possible harm could be involved, you have to assess both responses that you can give and then give the most harmless response possible. And that's a tricky thing. Judgment is a tricky thing.
Sometimes you have to know when you have to go back and apologize for something you said too. I got upset with my brother last night because we drink distilled water. I've bought 2 stills now, and because it's in the kitchen, he takes over anything in the kitchen. And the new one, he hadn't been cleaning it between each cycle, and I got upset with him last night. And I took the top half of it and hid it in my room and stuff. And then I realized, well, that's not how I wanted to handle that. So I went over to his room and I said, brother, I'm really sorry. This has to do with water damage, buildup of calcium and whatnot. And I said, I've been having all this problem that I'm trying to fix with water damage out in the RV. So after I apologized, we were right back on track. Everything was working out, and I said, okay, y'all, I'll keep it clean, and I won't overfill it. And, so it worked out for me to just go and apologize.
Right. And sometimes it's good to apologize even when you're justified in what you said. I remember I got irritated at Artie a while back and give her a piece of my mind. And afterwards I thought, well, she kind of deserved that. But I thought, because I was negative, it might have a negative effect on her. So I went and apologized to her. And I think that just diffused potential negativity, because whenever you feel negativity in the air, it's important to do whatever you can to disperse that negativity, even if you but apologize in a way that you can, be honest about the apology as much as you can. Because you can always apologize for hurting their feelings, because you never really want to hurt somebody's feelings.
At least let them know. At least let them know what the thinking was behind your actions.
Yeah, right. So when you said this, it upset me, and I didn't mean to hurt you back or anything. And so, if those of you who have been married for a few years, you will really understand the importance of apologizing. comes in handy, and we all need to do it now and then. But Okay. He says, harmless brings about in life caution and judgment, reticence in speech, and ability to refrain from impulsive action, and a demonstration of a non-critical spirit. Yeah, refrain from that impulsive action. That's a tricky one. If somebody really presses your buttons, that impulsive action is really difficult for people to control, and that's what we have to watch out from. We have to always assume control. Then he says, daily review your thoughts, emotions, and actions for harm. So at the end of each day, just before you fall asleep, just take a minute and think about how you scored, and maybe give yourself A, B, C, or D, or F. And if you give yourself an A, well, move on to the next day. If you give yourself an F, then figure out what you can do different. He says, daily review your thoughts, and in your review, ask yourself, have I been harmless in my thought? Have I been harmless in my emotional reaction? And have I been harmless in my physical response? Okay, that's pretty much it on harmlessness. Any more comments on that?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Don't go to work while you are ill, because you'll be impatient and snap at anybody who just a little bit annoys you.
Well, plus you might spread some germs and give other people what you got.
Yeah. Personal experience. Just stay at home, and so you will snap at yourself and not at anybody else.
Right. In other words, what Asaf is saying, he's examining himself and his reactions. Now, maybe other people may figure, well, I can go to work and just be myself, even though I'm got a cold or whatever. And in that case, he needs to ask if he's going to spread the germs and spread the cold. That would be harmful. So
no, I just meant impatient.
Right,
also,
right. It makes you impatient. So Asaf's assessing his reaction, and so he's trying to figure out how he can control his life, so he does the least amount of harm, right? Right. And so each of us has to do that with. Now, other things maybe, well, like other things, some people have tremendously different reactions when they drink a little alcohol. Some people can drink a lot of alcohol and just be completely harmless. Maybe a few drinks makes them jolly. Other people get mean and ornery. My dad was interesting that way. He could drink all kinds of beer and he would be very pleasant. But if he drank hard liquor, he became very nasty and looking for a fight just about. So people need to see how different drugs may affect them. The same thing with prescription drugs. You may take prescription drugs that may maybe make you more tempted to go along a harmful direction. Or maybe certain prescription drugs make you feel depressed, like taking your own life or something like that. That would be very harmful. So there's all kinds of ingredients that can lead us toward the path of harmfulness that we need to use good judgment to avoid. Okay, any other comments on this subject?
Yeah, that's why I used to call vodka the friendly drink, because you need to have friends to tell you the next day why you're not allowed in that club anymore.
Yeah, good point. Okay. Okay, any other comment here? Okay, he goes on to say he's going to make some suggestions, and then he makes a comment on suggestions themselves, which is important to repeat here. He says, the masters make suggestions, not commands. If there is a command, it's to follow the dictates of your own soul and higher self. How's that different from what you hear in church?
Oh, in church, it's not a suggestion. The guilt factor comes into play that if you don't follow the doctrines of the church or the church dogma, then you're guilty of
Right.
sin, and it interplays with the guilt factor. And,
right, it certainly does.
So it's not a mere, it's not a mere suggestion when you're in church and the doctrines are imparted to you. It's more of a command than it is, you will be, you shall be, not maybe you should be,
Certainly right. Yeah, in church, you're told what the commandments of God are, and who determines what the commandments of God are? Well, they say the scriptures, which are inspired by God himself, but different churches have different ideas of what commands are, don't they? And these commandments, they say we need to strictly obey, or we're really going to incur the wrath of God. And if you break them in any degree that the authorities disapprove of, you're going to feel guilt. If you feel in your heart that these authorities are truly representing God, then they will have power to give you tremendous guilt. And guilt is very harmful.
That's why they're called commandments. Just that very word implies, that you need to follow them.
Right. So the main thing to follow is your own soul. Does this mean that you don't follow any guidance at all then? Let's suppose that somebody is given a speak and they're talking about the will of God, and then your soul confirms to you, yes, this is something you need to do. So in this case, is this something that should be binding on you?
Well, it's like Shakespeare
common sense better on everything.
Yeah, who's that, Curtis? Yeah, what'd you say, Curtis?
Well, he said, Shakespeare, to quote him, he said, "This above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man."
Right.
But in the Mormon church, the attitude is when the leaders speak, the thinking has been done. So don't exercise any mental capacity, and certainly don't try to rise above what the leaders have said, or you'll be cast out, kind of like we were.
Right. And the only time that you should take any leadership as the voice of God is if your soul confirms it. Like, let's say a religious leader gets up and he says, love your neighbor as yourself. And your soul says, yeah, that's true principle. In this case, should you be bound by it?
Yes.
Well, yeah, if it's confirmed by your own soul.
Right. But you're bound by it not because the leader said it, but because your soul confirmed it. Two different things. On the other hand, if the leader gets up and says you shouldn't drink Coca-Cola, God doesn't want you to, and your soul says, well, just ignore that. Drink a little bit of Coke now and then, won't hurt you. So, what?
How much did they pay you for this?
Yeah, right. So in that case, the leader isn't representing the voice of God. Drinking maybe a Coke. I don't think Coke is that good for you myself. But I think drinking one every now and then won't do you much harm. But if you overdid it, it could.
I just read something last night that said when it comes to advice, taking advice, there's two extremes. There's take everybody's advice or take nobody's advice. And then it says, you're probably better off somewhere in the middle path.
Yeah, right. Right. People like to go one extreme or the other. Either they go completely by what authorities say, or they reject all authorities. And this is a problem with a lot of people when they leave a controlled religion. It's so nice to be away from that authority telling them what to do and to think for themselves, that then they reject all outward authority. But the key is in the middle, is when we do hear outward proclamations of what is true or what we're supposed to do, it's always a good idea to listen and then run it by your own soul, because the guy may be in touch with his soul that made the statement. And so it's good to stay in the middle, to not throw away all outward advice, listen to it, run it by your soul, and then go with what is confirmed. Now, if you're not sure you got confirmation from your soul, what then?
Follow the highest you know.
Yeah, suppose Curtis got this revelation that we're supposed to go on a mountaintop and meet Jesus in 2 weeks from now. And your soul just is taking a nap somewhere. Well, what do we do with old Curtis there?
We take a helicopter and observe it from above.
Yeah. I guess we could go up on the mountain and just see what happens out of curiosity.
Bring a little wine. You could have a little communion.
Yeah, unless Curtis provides us with real good entertainment, dancing girls and wine, well, we'll just read about it in the paper the next day if something big happened. Okay. Now, he makes his statement is that we went through Rule 2 in the last chapter, but he says we're not really done with it because Rule 2 and 3 are intertwined. And so he reserves some of his comments on Rule 2 to interplay with Rule 3. And so lost my page here.
105.
Here it is. Rule 2, when the shadow hath responded in meditation deep, the work proceedeth, the lower light is thrown upward, the greater light eliminates the 3, and the work of the 4 proceedeth. So that's Rule 2. So keep that in mind as we go along. He says the lower light is thrown upward, and the greater light eliminates the 3, and the work of the 4 proceedeth. He says, what is this lower light? Okay, what is that? Anybody got any idea?
It would be the light of the personality.
Yeah, it's a little different than I expected. The light of the personality is kind of part of it. But he says there's 3 ingredients to this lower light that he's talking about. One is the body of the soul itself, which you would think that would be the higher light. But he says this is all part of the lower light. The body of the soul, or the causal body, and the causal body is the vehicle which the soul uses. Just like we use the physical body as a vehicle to explore this world, the monad uses the causal body and creates the soul to explore both sides of creation. Okay? The second part of the lower light is in the etheric body. And the third part is the physical body. These are the 3 ingredients of what he calls the lower light here. He says these 3 types of energy are referred in the old commentary under symbolic terms. He says, when the radiant light of the solar angel is fused with the golden light of the cosmic intermediary, it awakens from darkness the rush light of Anu, the speck. Okay. What is the cosmic intermediary, do you think? When the radiant light of the solar angel is fused with the golden light of the cosmic intermediary. Unless you've read this chapter carefully, you probably don't know, so I'll just tell you. The cosmic intermediary is the etheric body. Okay? So when you have these fused, it awakens from darkness the rush of light of Anu. Any idea what the rush of light of Anu would be? The speck? It awakens from darkness the light within the atom itself, in other words.
Yeah.
So to translate this in the common language, when the radiant light of the solar angel is fused with the light of your etheric body, then it awakens from darkness the light within your physical atoms themselves. This is why some of the saints are described as glowing from different points in history, because their atomic structure actually releases more light. Their physical body actually releases more light when this blending of the solar light with the etheric light, and then it stimulates the actual light of the physical body itself. He says it is through the etheric body that all the energies flow, and this is beyond the physical, whether emanating from the soul or from the sun or from a planet. When the radiant light of the soul is blended with the magnetic light of the vital body, in other words, the etheric body, it stimulates the atoms of the physical body to such an extent that each atom becomes in its turn a radiant center. This only becomes possible when the head, the heart, the solar plexus, and the center at the base of the spine are connected in a peculiar fashion. When these four are in close cooperation, the floor of the triangle, as is symbolically called, is prepared for the magical work. So there's pretty heavy-duty words there that you have the head, the solar plexus, the center of the base of the spine, and the heart, all connected in a peculiar fashion. This produces a conduit of flow between the higher and the lower. So within what he calls the lower light here, you have the higher and lower lights. The soul, of course, is higher than the etheric. The etheric is higher than the physical. But these three lights must become one, and they become one through this merging of the head, the heart, the solar plexus, and center of the base of the spine. And when this happens, you have like the raising of the kundalini, where you have the circulation of energy going up and down the spine. And he says, in other words, these can be enumerated as follows. He says, A, the physical material form with its center at the base of the spine. B, the vital body working through the heart center where the life principle has its seat. The activities of the body which are due to this stimulation are carried through the circulation of the blood. And then the third, the emotional body working through the solar plexus. And then finally, the head center, the direct agent of the soul, its interpreter, the mind. These four are in complete accord and alignment, and when this is the case, the work of initiation proceeds. Now, he talks about this, it's interesting about this light that is created, that and where does this light come from? In the atom itself, DK tells us that the core of the atom is really light, and the electron shells surrounding the atom hides the light in the core. So somehow this stimulation of the atoms releases the light from the core. Now, how this would happen scientifically, I don't know, but apparently there's something happens with the electron shells that cause them to not block all the light from the core of the atom. And when we blend these three lights, then we have the lower light is thrown upward. And then the greater light eliminates the three. The greater light, he tells us, is pretty much the blending of the three. The blending of the three produces a greater light. And then the greater light eliminates the three. And what are the three that's eliminated? This is a little confusing because he talks about the three that compose the lower light, and then they blend with and produce a greater light, which then eliminates another three. So it's really easy in reading this to confuse three here and three there. Are they the same or different? They're actually different. So this is a different three. The greater light eliminates the three. What are the three that are enlightened by the greater light?
Well, the physical, etheric, and the mental.
Right. Well, yeah, the physical, etheric, he classifies as one, and then the mental and the emotional. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that would be, Joe, like if in a triad of three people, where their personalities blend and merge, and they together create something greater than themselves, which reflects down into each individual as a positive reinforcement or positive application of who they really are.
Right. Beginning of all life and all creation always begins with triangles. And Tibetan always looks for triangles within everything. So we have this triangle of the soul light blending with the etheric light, stimulating the physical light. These three become like one light. And when this happens, a person becomes what we call soul infused. In other words, he's one with his soul. And when he's one with his soul, the three lights become like one light. He becomes one in the soul. And then the soul light eliminates the three, the physical etheric, the emotional, and the mental. And when these three are filled with light, it's a little bit like Jesus says. He says, let your eye be single. If your eye is single, then you will be filled with light. And if not, you'll be filled with darkness. So anyway, interesting concepts.
This topic brings to mind one of the things that red flags on the when we talk about the molecule. This molecule is going to be top down. There's going to be nothing physical. It's going to be mental and spiritual and all that. And I'm thinking, not according to this. It's like when it's all light, it's affecting everything: physical, etheric, astral. If we create a molecule, it's going to have some physical repercussions. And so when we start talking about, oh, we're not going to be physical in this molecule, it's like, really? You know?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's interesting to contemplate all these things. I come across something very interesting. I think you'll be interested in hearing, Curtis. I don't have the exact quote, but we talked about it a couple weeks ago. I found a statement by the Tibetan that he seems to indicate that he talked about the externalization of the hierarchy. He said it wouldn't necessarily come in physical incarnation, but they would externalize through groups here upon the earth. And that turned on a light in my mind. I've read that several times, but it didn't dawn on me what he was saying. In other words, when we create these molecules, the hierarchy could externalize through the molecule itself. So we have a molecule or several molecules or whatever, starting with one anyway, that could be the beginning of the externalization of the hierarchy. In other words, the greater life that occupies the actual molecule would be the hierarchy itself.
So we're creating the vehicle for the hierarchy to infuse,
Externalize.
or expand or spread its energy through.
Right.
So each of us would be receptive to higher impressions, or our intuitive mind would be stimulated by the hierarchy.
Right. So if the hierarchy externalizes by occupying our molecules, then we can also see through their eyes more if we are in tune. And so that could create interesting situation. And it's possible that Christ could even make his second coming through a molecule. If it just all depends on what the need is, whether he needs to come in the physical or through group externalization. So anyway, I found that very interesting that everybody's waiting for the externalization of the hierarchy. Even DK students are to externalize in physical bodies, whereas DK actually said it would be through groups that they would externalize. So I found that very interesting.
Not just molecules; they could be community, community with oneness. I find in the work that I've done throughout my lifetime, I've been somehow attracted to communities, and it's like communities are like a higher form of being. If you when you work on a good community, it does bring down a bit of heaven.
Right. There's probably quite a few different groups throughout the world that are one enough for the hierarchy to work through in one fashion or another. But we haven't seen any group like the original 12 apostles materialize since the days of Jesus that we know about in history for sure.
Well,
okay.
Joe, that go along with that the original 12 apostles were grouped carefully in threes. If you study Da Vinci's portrait of the Last Supper, and the Tibetan says that the new religion will be based on triads.
Yeah.
Religion in the new age would be based on exactly what we're putting together. So that's correspondingly, it sounds to me like we're all on the right track here.
Yeah, we are indeed. We hope we are anyway. Okay. We just have enough time left to go do the meditation for the great invocation. So since this is a WESAC, we want to put extra attention on the great invocation today. And after we say the great invocation, we're going to have a period of silence where you contemplate a closeness to the hierarchy. And then we'll proceed after that. Okay, well, first of all, sound the Om, and for recording purposes, you guys will mostly just hear me, but everybody else will be pretty much on mute, so we won't hear you, unfortunately. But in the ethers, we will blend our voices. Om, 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 om. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. Om. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out. And may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Om 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 om. Okay, very good. Now let me direct your minds toward the essence of this great invocation. With the first stanza, the emphasis is on light, from the point of light within the mind of God. Visualize yourself as being one with God, looking upon your whole creation from a point within the mind of God. Light streams forth and it lands upon the earth and enlightens the whole planet. Visualize every person's mind upon the earth receiving this light. Light is bursting upon the earth. Every human being is touched, feels a light in his head. They see a light. They feel a light. Their understanding is increased. And what do they understand? They understand that their brother and sister is like themselves. And there's no reason for hate. There is only reason for love and acceptance. Now visualize yourself back in the presence of God again, and He's looking upon this planet Earth. And visualize what the heart of God must feel like. He looks upon us and feels empathy for us for everything that we have to go through. But He realizes this is a school where we have voluntarily came here to learn and to go through everything that we go through, good and bad. And from the point of love within the heart of God, love, the vibration streams forth and connects with the hearts of all the people upon the planet. And just as you now feel the love of God within your heart that is shared with all humanity, feel all humanity wanting to be one and live at peace and acceptance and loving their neighbors as themselves. It is time for the simple message of Christ to be consummated. Visualize yourself up in the presence of God again. He's looking down upon the earth, and He has a plan to guide humanity into an age of peace and abundance, away from all the pain and the hate and the wars and the turbulence, to a better world. He has a new heaven and new earth planned for us. And He sends forth His will. And those who are most enlightened sense this will. And the will includes love, acceptance, inclusion, and abundance for all humanity. And when we catch a glimpse of this will, we realize the truth of the statement that we cannot conceive of all the good things that God has in store for us. We have to reverse the thinking of humanity from doomsday to a day of abundance and wonderful things. And then from the center, which we call the race of men, or humanity, we sense these things. Light and love and power is manifesting through us. And by our own hand, we shut the door where evil dwells. We shut the door on hate and separation and selfishness. And we open the door to love, inclusiveness, and abundance. And above all, oneness. Now let us end with a last statement and followed by another period of silence. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Om. Okay, good vibes from you guys. Hopefully everybody felt the vibe. I know Curtis did. I could feel the lightness in his laugh there.
Good vibrations, brothers.
Yeah. Okay, any other comments or questions before we close?
I'd just like to mention to Rick that happy to be aboard with you guys if that's okay, and I'll hook up with you on Facebook on chat and talk to you about it later. We got a big bonfire tonight for the WESAC Festival, and we're anxious to get out there and start getting stuff together.
Cool.
So I'll be catching up with you.
Our triad
Rick
would
up
be,
on Facebook.
we'll be
Okay,
happy
buddy.
to join, have you all join our triad. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
Yeah, us too, Tracy and Jill.
Okay,
Thank you.
and thank you. You guys are a good group. Just the right size for a class like this, actually.
Yes, there was 12 of us today.
Was there?
Yeah,
Oh.
down at the bottom it says participants 12.
No, I thought there's only about 8. Let me see
No.
who else is here.
12 includes JJ.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Well, that's a good number. 12 is almost as good as 24.
yeah.
JJ, here the time of the WASAC will be 3:58 a.m. I'll be sleeping. What should I do?
Well, you could complain to God about the timing of it.
Okay, I'll do that.
Well, just before you go to sleep, say the great invocation. Then as you're going to sleep, your soul will quite possibly synchronize for you. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for all your sacrifice and being here. I know for some people the time zone's not that convenient. Asaf has to stay up late here to participate, and it's easier for. And Kenny is 5:30 in the morning where he is. Poor guy. So anyway, we appreciate y'all being here, and we will see you next week, if not sooner.
All right. Have a great week, Joe.
You bet, Curtis.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys. Bye.
Bye, Ken. Bye, Jill. Bye, Adam. Bye.
Bye.